Thank you, everyone, and thank you for attending, both in person and to our live audience. But before you hear from David and Richard, we would like to play a video clip of Fellowship Farm.
For 75 years, Fellowship Farm has been an educational leader in the field of human relations, becoming one of the nation's premier education and retreat centers dedicated to leadership development and social change. Throughout its rich history, Fellowship Farm has hosted many influential individuals and groups. Martin Luther King Jr. first learned about Gandhi's theory and practice of nonviolence there.
It was not so much connecting with Martin Luther King as connecting with his ideas, having some sort of a feel about him as a person just by being in his presence.
The farm collaborated with Native Americans, educated people about Africa, the Bright Continent, received Central American refugees, and was the first sister agency for Nev Shalom, an Arab-Jewish cooperative settlement in Israel. Youth growth has been their focus in areas of leadership development and helping community activists learn team building. Fellowship Farm is an advocacy organization that develops programs to serve the community, designed to strengthen families and help build leadership skills for youth.
It's youth, and it's also families, and it's also adults.
I learned how to be more self-expressive at Fellowship Farm. I learned how to make friends and keep friends. Fellowship Farm also had such a big impact on my life that 17 years later, I remember just like it was yesterday. I remember the activities. I remember the people that were there. I remember the breakfast. I remember that warm oatmeal. And it wasn't any different from any other oatmeal, but it was that warm, soothing feeling that it gave me because of the atmosphere I was in. It was just a warm place to be. So I love Fellowship Farm.
That's what's been happening at Fellowship Farm over and over again for 75 years. And we want to make sure that that continues to happen, that we inspire people for the next 75 years to live a life of fellowship. We need that now more than ever.
David, can you tell us why Fellowship House in Philadelphia was renamed and relocated to Fellowship Farm in Pottstown, Pennsylvania?
Yes, Fellowship Farm is located outside of Pottstown, but it's really still, its heart and its programs are focused on Philadelphia and its 5-county area. It moved when Marjorie Penny, our founder, who had Fellowship House in Philly, and helped create things like the Green Circles, Singing City program, and bringing people of diverse groups together when they couldn't be in the 40s and 50s. There was a farm, a chicken farm, that was for sale because, sadly enough, the parent's child was killed in Korea and wanted to give it to a nonprofit who was doing work on, and good work and peace among people. Fellowship Farm's founders and members mortgaged their homes, sold their homes. Some of them moved to Fellowship Farm, and they felt they really needed more in-depth learning while living together. And hence we now have 126 acres. We have a pond, we have basketball courts, we have 10 rope courses for leadership development, and we're very proud of the evolution of Fellowship Farm from 1951, when it became Fellowship Farm, to today.
So another question that I had to ask is, we saw in the video that there was an enormous amount of diversity in the groups that were pulled together at Fellowship Farm. So give me some ideas around, or the audience, if you will, about how the trainings, the workshops are designed. How did you get to these particular, this curriculum? And then again, the next question would really be, how do you get families involved?
Adventures in Harmony was a program with the entire school district of Philadelphia. We brought together Black, white, Latino, and Asian young people, some key parent supporters, and some key administrators and principals, but mainly young people. We brought them out for a day, and overnight, and the next day. And the goal was to identify similarities, differences, obstacles to achieving their own potential, obstacles to creating a safe school that actualized everybody in spite of stigmas, biases, and stereotypes. And then what they did is they then did role plays, so before they left, they then prepared to go back to their peers in the school and to become change agents and leaders in the school.
Great, that's awesome. Richard, I read that you have been a facilitator at the Fellowship Farm since you were 17 years old.
Well, believe it or not, you know, as a student at George Washington High School, a friend of mine came to me one day, and I think I was around 10th grade, and said, Richard, there's a group in the school that's going to Fellowship Farm for overnight trips. I was not a part of the trip.
Okay.
Not a part of the group either. And the name of the group was the Human Relations Council.
Okay.
So a friend of mine and I, he was not a part of it as well. We said, well, we do want to go because we can get out of school for a day.
Okay, so it was a cutting day.
Right. To
Like
some
a
degree.
17-year-old would really think about.
Right, cutting with
Okay.
permission.
Okay,
Right.
cutting with permission.
Right. So what we decided to do was take a look at the Human Relations Council, see what it was about, and of course to sign the papers and get the permission slips. And so we did that. And little did I know, you know, we got on the bus to go to Fellowship Farm, really excited, you know, because we knew that. And by the way, I was a good student, so it, you know, wasn't that type of thing. All right, we got to Fellowship Farm and looked around, like, wow, you know, totally different environment, very peaceful, beautiful place. And so we were really excited about being there. Because we weren't a part of the Human Relations Council initially, most of the students were. So we were kind of new. So of course, the friend of mine and I, we kind of stayed relatively close until maybe within the first hour, got an opportunity to meet all the students, participate in a number of activities so that we all could feel relatively comfortable. Now mind you, that was in the 10th grade. We stayed overnight, went through a Adventures in Harmony program, again, which I came through David, and had a wonderful experience. And what happened was on the bus, or just before I got on the bus to come back home, one of the facilitators from Fellowship Farm at the time said to me, Richard, when you graduate, call up here and see if you can get a job. At that time, I was clueless as to why he said it, but at 17, a couple of years later, graduating, getting ready to go to Temple, I said, well, I need a job. Prior to calling up about a job, however, I joined the Human Relations Council and became a very active member. As soon as I graduated, I called up Fellowship Farm, and even till today, don't know why the facilitator said to me, you know, call up here and you would be good here. Saw something in me that apparently I didn't recognize in myself. Became a facilitator at 17, and you know, it has certainly catapulted my life in the direction of being an architect, which is what I originally would go to school for, but instead of building buildings, you know, I'm told that I built lives through the work that I've, you know, done at Fellowship Farm.
All right, he needs a dap.
He needs a dap.
Give
We get a
him a
dap.
dap.
We get a dap.
I like the story that you shared with us about getting permission to cut school and not being part of the Human Relations Council. It seems that the Fellowship Farm actually kind of fell right into bringing you back so that you could be a part of that.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
I do want to say that one of our goals is never to bring the leadership that is assigned by the administrators or the teachers. You always have those leaders, and you also have the indigenous grassroots leaders, because those are people who could be at a tipping point, and when they leave, like Richard, they can then really bring a large group of people.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. So how do you know when they're at the tipping point?
One of the ways,
yeah.
One of the ways is to not get the administrators or the senior teachers, but to get the advisors or the other students who are the student council leaders to say, you know, this kid is a little bit of a problem, or this teacher says this, but there's room to work, but I'm not sure. And then we say, we're sure. If you bring those folks, like you were an outsider, but there's a norm that comes and it sweeps over you, and our goal is to treat people based upon the better angels of their nature.
Wow.
And that's what Martin Luther King talked about, and that's what we're talking about. And once they're there, they leave enthused, touched by the spirit they already have, and given skills to try to now be a change agent for a positive force.
Groups can come up for half a day, a full day, and they can go home with a lot. I mean, and they really do. But the groups that come up for overnight experience, they really are able to capture the essence of, you know, even, you know, the theories and the practices of Martin Luther King and Gandhi, et cetera, because in the evening time, that's when we kind of relax a little bit and we participate in talent shows. In the evening time, you can go up to the campfire, share stories, have reflections. And then when you go back to the dorms, although, you know, the young ladies are separate from the boys, so that's, you know, that was good. That made Mom feel much better.
Right.
All right.
It's making me feel a lot better.
It's making you feel a lot better as well. But in the dorms, we were able to, again, share and talk about our own personal experiences and what happened throughout the day. And the friend of mine who, you know, was and still is, you know, my best friend, at Fellowship Farm, he was not the focus, any longer. I developed a number of other friendships from dinner, through the talent show, through the campfire, etc. So during the programming piece and the training, it was about obtaining the skills necessary to become, better in my social skills and life skills and diversity. But in the evening time is when we really got a chance to develop some really strong relationships that carried us after we left Fellowship Farm.
And I just want,
Yeah.
if I'm going to say, when
Yeah.
you get off the bus that first hour, what I've begun to remember and see when folks get off is not any of the programs yet. They get off, and all of a sudden they hear, like, there's a pond. They don't hear fire engines, they don't hear police sirens, they don't hear cars. They see alpacas, and they see llamas, and they see donkeys and mini horses. They see chickens walking around. And all of a sudden, it's almost like they take a mask off, and they go deeper, quicker, because it feels safe. There's a
Yeah.
spirit there that just makes those 2 days almost like a week, and then opens them up to issues. And we do chambers of commerce, we do leaders in companies now, as well as students, and whether it's a day or overnight, that spirit and these activities bring out what skills, based upon stretching their comfort zone and saying, I'm going to go this direction because I feel safe, though I might be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's the key to any kind of growth.
What other programs do you facilitate at Fellowship?
There's an anti-bullying upstanders, not bystanders program to teach young people how to change the culture from being a bystander culture to an upstander culture, and how to have the courage to be able to do that, and the skills to be able to safe to do that, and how to get allies who are your bosses or your principal or your teachers or your parents to be able to do that. We deal with leadership groups that are adult groups in regard to diversity and inclusion, with young people who have autism, Asperger's, ADHD.
Yeah.
We talk about anti-stigma training. And we take young people who have a stigma, let's say a physical disability or a developmental challenge or a physical appearance issue or a developmental challenge as an adult who has a stutter or is in a wheelchair or who is openly gay, or is somebody who is from another diverse viewpoint, and somebody who's Muslim. And we take these so-called young people with stigma, and we take other people with so-called no stigmas, and we really see how all of us have diversity that holds stigmas and other people's biases, and how that's just one piece, but all, as you said earlier, the similarities far outweigh the differences. And how do we now learn our own self-esteem and social skills to get over those stigmas? And how do the now so-called normal kids, for example, or adults, say, wait a minute, what the heck is normal? I'm redefining that.
Exactly.
Now I have a skill to include and be an ally for those people with others who I thought were my friends, but don't share my values.
There are a few activities that they can demonstrate, and we're going to ask for audience participation.
We're simulating a couple of activities out of the 15 to 20 that we might do in a program.
Okay.
And this is called Not or Not Not.
All right. Now, let's see here. Our wonderful volunteers, all right? If I could have our volunteers join me, and you can face each other. All right. Isn't it a wonderful thing when you can volunteer and you be applauded at the same time? Yeah, okay. I love going to work and being applauded. All right. So if you were to take a look at this, as well as Andre and David behind me, right now it just looks like a rope. But if you notice, I have an end here, okay, and I also have an end over there. Do we have to do anything? And just very quickly, I'm going to need 2 volunteers just to share with me your name. What's your name? Natalie, and I'm going to grab one on this side. Natalie and Pamela. Suppose I had Natalie come over here, and you're not going to do that yet, but Natalie would pick up this end of the rope, and Pamela picked up the other end of the rope, and Pamela were to take the end of the rope and walk through that door, and Natalie likewise this way. If you guys were to pull the rope vertically, would this end up in a knot or not? If we were to pull this rope, if Natalie pulled this in and Pamela pulled that in, would it end up in a knot or not? If you think it is a knot, I need you to stand on this side. If you think it is not a knot, I need you to stand on this side. You may move. It is a knot. It is not a knot. All right. Okay. Awesome. Now, one more challenge for you. Okay, I need one representative to tell me why you're standing on that side. What is it that you see? Why do you think you're standing on the side where it is a knot? Yes.
It looks like it's all intertwined together, so I say when you start to pull at both ends, it's going to wind up a knot.
Okay. And I need one volunteer on this side to share with me why it is not a knot. By show of hands, how many people from where you're sitting think it is a knot? Raise your hand. Okay. How many think it's not a knot? Raise your hand. Well, let's see how well they did with their convincing. Well, here's the thing. We're not going to pull the rope as of yet.
Yeah. Right.
What I need to happen, because right now we're talking about what we think and what we see and how we get others to think like we think, how we get others to believe what we believe. I'm going to actually ask David if he can come forward and do something else with you, with the whole audience, before we go to the next level of is it a knot or not. All right, David.
Thank you. You can sit down. Thank you so much. Please stand. And now, this is going to last 60 to 90 seconds, so don't get too concerned. I'm going to ask you to please take this finger, pointing finger, and stretch it out to the ceiling so your elbows locked and straight vertically, all those except for those shoulder tears. Now I want you to imagine a clock in the ceiling that goes one clockwise, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, an analog clock. Now what I want you to do, and follow me for 60 seconds, I want you to go clockwise and circle with your whole shoulder, big wide circle clockwise. Then gradually bend your elbow so your finger is still pointing to the ceiling, and gradually circle your finger clockwise, but lower your finger so that it's circling clockwise until it's just below your eye or nose. Now look down at your circling finger and tell me what direction your finger is now circling.
Counterclockwise.
You may sit down. For those who didn't hear, they screamed what?
Counterclockwise.
Counter, oh my God. Now there are a few people who are hiding, like these two folks right there who say, oh, you caught me, who are saying, what is he talking about? I didn't do anything. You can go to the restrooms after the session, lock the stall, do it, and nobody will laugh at you, okay? Or we have a remedial session at 5 o'clock where those who really want to know. So, most of you said, I started clockwise, and then I looked down, and it was going counterclockwise. What word, phrase, might you say describes why that phenomena happened?
Perception.
Perception, another word or phrase.
Perspective.
Perspective, perception, perspective, another word or phrase.
Point of view.
Point of view. So let's take this. Perception, perspective, or point of view. There could be somebody else who says, you tricked us, but we're not going to take those responses, okay? So now, just think about this. From my perspective or point of view, I'm going clockwise, right? You were going clockwise. And then from my perspective or point of view, based on my perception, it is now going counterclockwise. So, what does this have to do with diversity and inclusion as a teacher? You talked about differences and stigmas in education. As a teacher, I got this amazing lesson plan, and I know how my students will respond to this. And I'm doing this, and it doesn't have to be a developmental challenge, although it could be a social style difference. It could be rural to urban. It could be something, what's the great story from the Peace Corps? You go to the Peace Corps in Africa, the great story where they're teaching math to the village young people. And it says, you have a gun, and there are 10 birds on the wire, and you shoot the gun, and you hit one bird. How many birds are left on the wire? And what is the answer? Let me hear, what is the answer? Don't be afraid of being wrong. 0, what's another answer? 9. Because in one culture, What we're saying is linearly, when I say I have 10 and then I shoot 1, there's 9. That's the right answer. And in that culture, when you shoot 1, the noise will scare off all the birds and there'll be none. And so from my perspective, the teacher says, wait a minute, from Dayton, Ohio, those kids don't get the math. And from the kids, they say, this teacher doesn't get the reality of our village. And both need to know the other person's perspective. Or at Comcast, we were just talking about national sales or customer service. So I'm sitting here and I'm in New Jersey, in an urban area in New Jersey, and I'm on the phone with a customer who is from a rural area in Alabama. There is a way in regard to pace, style, accent, that when I speak to the person as though they are like me, like I am, I run the risk of missing how they perceive of my pace as not trying to be clear and direct, but by being rude and not listening, but rather telling. So in business, whether it's in education or whether it's in national security, what we're looking at is I see it from this way, but before I go ahead and implement it, let me listen and understand where others see it. First, seek to understand, and then only seek to be understood. You know the concept of devil's advocate? Where you say, in a team meeting, let me be a devil's advocate. It's almost like the senator saying, with all due respect. There was a leader who instituted in her team this ritual, which is once we have a conflict, an innovative idea to solve a problem or to create a system or a product, when somebody presents or speaks, everybody is obligated as the ticket of their ability to speak next to be an angel's advocate. Because everybody, for good or not so good reasons, knows how to be a devil's advocate, particularly if they want to. You ever see somebody at a meeting and they're like, their knees going, they're pretending, oh yeah, I'm really interested in you, but you know as soon as you shut up, they're going to go in and say, yes, but, rather than yes, and. So an angel's advocate is, this leader instituted, she said, before anybody speaks at this team meeting, after somebody else speaks, you are obligated to first be an angel's advocate. Angel's advocate means that you have to first listen and then start off by saying, what's your first name? Jay. You know, now I may think, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm going to really get over on you with a leader. I have to listen and then say, you know, here are, you mentioned 8 points. Here are 3 key things that I think are valuable about what Jay said. And also, I'd like us to consider the following. And I present 3 or 4 more. So what that does is that ritual forces me, as I'm waiting for you to take a sigh so I can jump in, forces me to actually listen, because my permission is going to be dependent upon me actually remembering what you said and identifying 3 key items, strong items that I thought were valuable to our solution or to our idea. And only then am I able to say not but, yes, but this is 100%, but and. And part of what we're talking about when we're talking about diversity and inclusion is talking about the yes and, not the yes but. This is the only way to do it.
Thank you. Okay. Brittany?
I have some questions from the virtual audience. One being, they want to know if Fellowship Farm has any intention to move across the country to have more locations.
We have a sister organization in Israel called Neve Shalom, the only Arab Jewish village and settlement in Israel that has a school for peace that's been in existence for close to 25 years. And we were one of their American sponsors and supporters, and they did a tour all over the United States. There are wonderful other organizations in this economy. Our goal is to support, get support, and to struggle with our support base currently in the future. And we work with a lot of other organizations like the school districts we talked about, like the Coalition for Essential Schools, like the Child Guidance Resource Centers, and other organizations. And we love to co-work with and design programs for adults, organizations, or young people.
And one more question.
Okay.
Someone asked if, this is a hypothetical, if Martin Luther King were still alive today, what class or what theme do you think he would teach today at Fellowship?
It's kind of bringing it together because we said a little bit at the beginning. But I, thank God, I was involved in civil rights movement and jail, and Richard was involved in different ways when Dr. King was alive and leading programs. And when those dogs attacking his kids and fire hoses and machine guns, I mean, all that was arrayed against him, and beatings, he would go right up to the person spitting at him and yelling curses and epithets at him. And he would beam love. And he would beam an energy that he believed could change and indeed transform the adversary, because what happened is they were the ones with the shackles that were acting out things they didn't realize about their acculturation. And he trusted and believed that that spirit could transform. When we have young people, community service from courts, young people and teenagers, when we have people who go into companies, and there are people who are kind of like the ones who don't quite know how to deal with people who are different from the way they were raised, instead of treating them as people who have problems and we're going to punish them and teach them and change them, we believe, and Dr. King believed, that people don't so much, people change not because people try to make them change, because they themselves are the agents of their change through some kind of force and spirit. Mm-hmm. And so when people come to the farm, we trust, regardless of their background, that they will allow that light, that spirit, and the resilience and the aspirations and the skills they have inside of them to be better than they are acting out to be. And let's say I was working with a police force in this major city years ago, and I would just be exhausted over every session as a facilitator. And I would say to myself, this is just tearing me apart, because all the pictures on the wall were all white Anglo men until just 2 years ago, and they're coming because they're forced. And all of a sudden I realized part of it was me. Mm-hmm. I needed to treat these people, not that I need to change them.
Right.
I needed to treat them as they're good people, and that they had the resources and the will to unshackle themselves, and they didn't put the shackles on their mom, their dad, their teachers, a bad experience, a culture, the media, whatever the reason was. And when all of a sudden I realized that my goal is to help them actualize and liberate themselves, rather than me being the hero and doing it, that tension flowed out of me, and that spirit enabled people so that then they could help teach me. And true story, well, a wonderful person allows me to use the name Richard Friend, who's now in Chicago, was at Penn, an amazing leader in the Lesbian and Gay Alliance, and a facilitator I brought into the police department in Philadelphia. At the end of the session, we had a feedback session, and he said, what's the strength, the greatest experience you had? And they said, I want to thank you, Richard, for helping me, the officer said, open up my mind and heart and help break down my stereotypes about gay men. Okay. And Richard responded by saying, and I want to thank everybody here for helping me break down my stereotype about cops.
Great. So on that, we are at the end of our session. I wanted to thank David Tulin, Executive Director of Fellowship Farm, Richard Washington, leader of educational facilitation for Fellowship Farm. If we could give them a round of applause. I want to thank our live audience and our virtual audience from Comcast and as well as NBC Universal. Thank you for joining us today for Fellowship Farm to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. I want to thank the Comcast production team for running the show, which they do all the time with great quality. And thank you all for being here and participating. And please join us on February 26th for the next Employee Enrichment Series honoring Black History Month. And this concludes our program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.